Hello, my name is Chris Snipes, and you are listening to The Melt. I think that it's safe to say at this point that something just isn't right in regards to the whole COVID debacle. The media is desperately trying to keep people immobilized by fear and bad corporate science, while the state seems to be hell-bent on taking advantage of the increased tension level to exert more unneeded and disproportionate control over us by turning masks into the ultimate virtue signal and shaming anyone who dares to question the mainstream narrative. What happened to the people that I used to know who always questioned authority, never trusted the media and its corporate CIA agenda, and would never take medical advice from a billionaire? People who used to revel in reading William Burroughs talk about government-spread viruses and the encroaching, albeit misguided and bumbling, police state. They got a taste of the Kool-Aid, that's what. They got sick of questioning everything and resigned themselves to the lockstep, suckling on the teat of the very 1% that they were all up in arms about, rather than risk being called out as someone who was daring to consider a different line of thought than the masses, which these days is called the outrageously generalized and overused and frankly fucking boring term, conspiracy theorist. Well, thanks to people like today's guest, Pam Popper, we can not only begin to dig ourselves out of this confusing train wreck and assess the damage, but we can actually begin to do something about it. I begin the conversation by asking her what her professional background is.
Well, about 25 years ago, I started a company called Wellness Forum Health. We're based in Columbus, Ohio. And what we do, we have an unusual niche in the healthcare marketplace. We specialize in informed medical decision making. And what that means is really teaching people how to be good consumers of health information. And this is everything from the supplements you take, the dietary practices you adopt, the tests you agree to, the drugs you're prescribed, the procedures, everything. And it was true then, and certainly true now, that most people just do what they're told. And so the typical thing that we hear from people who engage with us for the first time is, gosh, if I'd known then what I know now, I never would have. And then you can fill in the blank. They did something that it turned out to be a bad idea that they didn't check out. So we've been in that business for a long time. We've developed about 3,500 hours of educational programming, about 2,500 referenced articles on everything from what do you do if you have kidney stones to what if you have stage 4 cancer or how to prevent disease, that sort of thing. And lots about diet and lifestyle change. And so part of our responsibility, oh, and by the way, we own a school, so we train health professionals how to engage differently with their patients, somewhat the same way that we do. So part of what we do is whenever something new happens in healthcare, it could be a new drug, a new procedure, whatever, I'm looking into it, new vaccine. My job is to look into it and prepare information for our libraries and our classes. And then some of it, we talk about for free on YouTube and in the newsletter. So when the COVID thing started, this was just like, it started as a routine thing. People are asking, what the heck's going on with this COVID thing? And I started looking into it. I had good reason to believe that there was something wrong, which we can talk about if you want. And as it turned out, there was something really wrong. But that's basically how my background and then how this investigation into COVID began.
Gotcha. Well, what led you to believe that something didn't add up?
Oh, well, there was a very interesting thing that happened back in 2009 and 10. And I was following it, and I made a prediction because something unusual happened. And it was when the H1N1 swine flu happened. And supposedly, as the story went, somebody brought it here from Mexico. And so we were going to have an epidemic. They weren't calling it a pandemic, but we were going to have an epidemic, and it was going to be really terrible. And everybody needed to get the flu vaccine. And we were going to test everybody who came in from Mexico to make sure that they didn't have it before they were allowed in. And then a really interesting thing happened. This is what got me thinking something was wrong. The Centers for Disease Control and the World Health Organization at the same time made an announcement, and they said, oh, the system is so overrun with these H1N1 cases, we don't have time to test anymore. You just assume that it's H1N1 and report it that way.
Wow.
And I wrote an article, and you can see the timestamp if you have access to our library, that it was predicted accurately. And what was happening is there was no epidemic. And in order to gin up the numbers, they needed to make it look like there was. So all of a sudden, you've got every urgent care and emergency room, everybody who shows up with a sniffle or a cough is now being coded as H1N1. And it drove up the numbers, and it made people go get the vaccine. The feds had bought like 94 million doses or something like that. And at the end of the whole thing, CBS News, this was back when reporters actually had a little bit of curiosity and they used to check stuff out. CBS News did an investigation, as did some news agencies in Europe, and they found out that that's exactly what happened. There was never a pandemic. In fact, nobody coming from Mexico tested positive, just to give you an idea of what a hoax it was. And so there was, here in the United States, when you do something like that, you get your hands slapped, and don't do that anymore. This lying to the public is a bad idea, bad boy, and then life goes on. In Europe, there was a little bit more harsh language, but Margaret Chan, who's head of the Director General of the World Health Organization, she got to finish out her term and retire. She's still well respected in the field, even though there were scathing articles written about the cost, the fear factor, the financial cost of this, billions and billions of dollars wasted. And of course, there's never enough money to go around in healthcare. So this seemed an awful lot like that. Like maybe that was just a dress rehearsal for something later on. And actually, there were several dress rehearsals, but that's what it seemed like. And gosh, it turned out to be exactly that. Again, just a bigger version.
Why do you think that they fudged the numbers for that?
Well, to get the people to get the vaccine, that's what they're doing right now. In other words, if we were looking, let me say this. One of the jobs of public health is to collect data, because data informs decisions. And so it is an abomination that we will never know who actually has COVID, because the tests are unreliable and the data has been manipulated. We will never know who actually died from it, because the death certificates have been forged. And every week you hear about another person who was certainly a COVID death, and when they tested postmortem, they weren't. And somebody's screaming about a motorcycle accident, and they coded it as COVID, and then the health department hurries up and fixes it because, they got caught. So we're never going to know how many cases and deaths there were. But the reason for inflating them is you get the public panicked, and then you can get them to do what you want. In this case, it's more severe than just lying and getting people to get a vaccine. It's actually shutting down the world.
And there's the whole layer of the masks too. Like, it's become almost the civil war of masks, those for and those against. Why do you think that that's taken on such a considerable amount of weight? Why is so much pressure being put on us to wear these masks?
Well, it's not, they don't care about masks, and they don't care about our health. They care about controlling people. And this is basically a psyop, if you want to call it that. We'll see how far we can push these people before they won't take anymore. And as it turns out, they can push a significant percentage of the population to do almost anything they want. I really think some of the people who are buying this load of nonsense, and I don't know how anybody can listen to it right now and not call it a load of crap, but some of these people, if our governor said, listen, we've discovered that if you stand on your head and sing jingle bells at lunchtime every day, the COVID doesn't come toward you. And we'd have an epidemic in Ohio of people standing on their head and singing jingle bells. They'll do whatever they're told. And the reason it's become such a point of division is that people like me, who know that there is no pandemic, that this is a hoax, that there's nothing to be concerned about, that our governor, we call him the emperor, he's not really a governor anymore, that the emperor of Ohio is, having people knock on doors to gin up the cases, and everybody who's hospitalized for everything has to be tested. And a lot of those people are tagged as cases because the state gets like 80 grand for every one of them. So we know that, and we refuse to put a mask on. It's a sign of humiliation. I won't bow to it. And it's also unhealthy, and I won't deal with that either. I mean, I watch these people touching their masks all the time and taking them on and taking them off. They're the hazard. They're hurting themselves, and the state and the health authorities are instructing them to hurt themselves every day. So there are many of us have just drawn a line in the sand. I've not worn a mask. I'm not going to wear a mask. I'll let them arrest me if they choose to do that. That would kind of make a big national splash, I think. But I'm not going to wear a mask.
Well, a lot of people, I think, not only do it because they dare not question the main narrative, lest they be lumped into the category of conspiracy theory. And these days, you're automatically labeled as a right-wing conspiracy theorist if you buy anything that's not on CNN. And that there's that scary word of mandate. There's a lot of mask mandates going on. What is the difference, the actual difference between a mandate and a law, and how much legality is behind a mandate?
There's no legality behind the mandate. And that's why in most places they slap your hand, they fine you, and then people don't take them to court. But here there's no criminal penalty because there can't be. And by the way, the sheriffs in Ohio and some other places too have basically said, we're not doing anything about it. They know that there's no law. You can't arrest anybody, you can't fine anybody, the whole 9 yards. So what's happened is in states like the Ohio, the emperor has directed the Department of Health in the various areas to handle it. And so if you get caught, supposedly if your business gets caught letting people without a mask come in and somebody snitches on you, then the Department of Health calls and educates you about the importance of wearing masks. And boy, I'll tell you what, everybody's terrified about getting a call for education. I mean, it just makes me really shake and in fear that I might get an education call. Right? I mean, there's absolutely no teeth to it. I would imagine that for some of the people in some states who have been fined, if they would decide to take it to court at some point in time, it wouldn't stand up.
Well, so a business really can't legally deny you entry based on a mandate?
And most of them don't want to. And I think the key is first of all, everybody in Columbus knows where you can go where they're not being dogmatic about the masks. Many places that are dogmatic about the masks, if you just are nice to them and say, listen, one woman said she just walks up to the door if they have some kind of mask Nazi there and says, listen, I know you have a tough job to do, but I really can't wear a mask for medical reasons. And you don't have to tell them what it is. It's none of their business. It could be just that you need oxygen. That's my medical reason. But, I cannot wear a mask. And so I'd like to go shopping, or should I go elsewhere? And most of the time they just let her go in. So I think the key is not showing up loaded for bear, like I want to have a fight with the people at the door. The national chains backed off of it very quickly. I think they spent 48 hours with that. In all of our stores were going to demand it, and then they stopped. And I'll tell you why I think that is. My attorney thinks that two things happened. One is the lawsuits that they were going to have filed. I mean, just think about if you had 25 million people sue Walmart, because it's got a lot of money. Walmart has a lot of money. So if you're looking for a target to sue for violating your rights, that's a good one. Well, even if you got them all dismissed, 20 million lawsuits would cost them a fortune. The other thing they were concerned about, well, two other things actually. One is making somebody wear a mask who has COPD, and the guy falls on the tile floor and concrete floor and ends up owning Walmart when his family sues. And of course, the employees were increasingly just saying, please don't put us in this position. They're tired of it. So the national chains backed off and there's difference of how it's handled place to place. But, we all know the Walmarts to go to and the Targets to go to and that kind of thing, so that you can have a mask-free existence.
Yeah, my family and I just got back from going on a little vacation to Boulder, and I live in Lawrence, Kansas, and they are a lot more enlightened about it there. Lots of places don't even have signs. There's a lot of anti-mask graffiti on the streets and on the billboards. It just seems to be a little more resistance, whereas here, everybody who once called themselves a rebel and didn't pay attention to authorities and so on, and called themselves questioners, are just walking lockstep without questioning at all, because they have been conditioned to think that you wear a mask for other people, which makes you noble.
Right. And that'll change. These people aren't noble at all, obviously. And so that'll change if something happens, and if something is going to happen soon, and I can't tell you about it right now, but we'll have another show where I can. If something happens that it would suddenly expose the hoax, it's a hoax, right?
Hmm.
I don't think that these people, noble as they are, like wearing a mask. They're just doing it because they think it's noble. I don't think they like social distancing. They're just doing it because it's noble. And if somebody could actually prove to them that they don't have to do it anymore, they'd gladly give it up. I don't know anybody who's enjoying it. I know some people who are enduring it better than others. But I think that the tide could turn very quickly, and I think it will when the time comes.
Yeah, it's become a form of a very obvious and tangible form of virtue signaling. Like
Hmm.
I'm
I'm
better
not
than you.
virtuous, just so you know. I've never been virtuous about anything. I mean, I don't believe in that kind of. Well, I think the virtue, the thing about that bothers me is that right now, the things that need to be done to help people are not wearing masks. So while these idiots are walking around, they are idiots walking around with masks and acting, high and mighty. I'm not wearing a mask, but I'll tell you what I am doing. I own a food company, and I order takeout, delivery food 4 days a week, not because I need it. I'm trying to help restaurants stay in business. A couple of my favorites, okay? We have therapists who are giving group sessions for $10 a session. Where in the heck are you going to get therapy for $10 a session? But people are unhinged, and we're trying to help them. We have extra people at the office who answer the phone. These people who are calling, most of them, not most, but a lot of them are not clients. They're just hysterical. And we've hired people to talk to them because they're lonely and they're scared and the whole 9 yards. This is helpful. Okay, this is helpful. It's not pretending to be virtuous. And I'm not saying this because I want to blow my own horn. There are a lot of people who are doing things like what our company is doing, but this is what it's like to actually be helpful. So to walk around with your with your mask on as if this is your contribution to the whole thing, you need to wake up if you're listening to this and take a look at the disaster that's going on out there. Another thing we invested a lot of resources in building a homeschool resource center, and we're helping families all over the country get their kids out of these dystopian places we used to call school. That's helpful. That's virtuous. This is helping somebody in a meaningful way. So I'm really kind of over the virtuous mask wearers looking down their nose at me. Tell me what you did last week that helped with this crisis that's been manufactured, that's put people out of work and made people commit suicide and overdose on drugs and become completely unhinged. And I think what they ought to do is all come to my office and just answer the phone for an hour and a half. They'd change their tune really fast.
For sure, definitely. Well, what is the CDC saying about masks?
Well, it depends on what day you ask them. And that's another thing too. It's like, what does the feckless Fauci say? Well, first he said we shouldn't wear them. Then he admitted he lied, but it was to protect the masks for the healthcare providers. And then he said we should wear masks. And then his last thing is we should wear goggles. And I think bubble wrap is probably next. We're going to like wrap ourselves from head to foot and not worry about breathing anymore and walk around. I mean, and the CDC said, the masks, most of the studies show that the masks are not helpful and incredibly harmful, actually. And on their website, they've now fixed it. All the search engines and everything, as you know, are being manipulated every day.
Sure.
So I have screenshots of it, the study that they've had posted there for a long time. It was a meta-analysis of all the hand washing and it's incessant cleaning, which doesn't do any good, by the way, and the mask wearing, which doesn't do any good. So they actually say their historical statements about masks have been that they're useless and potentially harmful.
And how else has the CDC proven itself to be unreliable?
Well, the first thing is it's being run by a guy. This Robert Redfield. I've done a lot of, this book is going to be about 300 pages, 250, 300 pages long. So I've been doing a lot of research. So let's just start with the CDC director. He was with the Army for a long time, and he got involved in military in medical research while he was with the military on the HIV/AIDS during the day when that was an important issue. And he was working on developing a vaccine for a virus that we're not really sure we need a vaccine. Well, we still don't have a vaccine for it. And by the way, nobody has ever been able to figure out how a virus determines what your sexual orientation is to know whether or not to infect you or not. I mean, the whole thing was just a travesty at the time. But anyway, Redfield, the guy who's head of the CDC, got in some trouble for fabricating data. And he was actually called on the carpet for doing it. And then he presented the fabricated data at a conference like just a month later, and he got in some more trouble. And by the way, his assistant at the time was none other than Deborah Birx. And so they were like frick and frack back in that day too. So frick and frack, Redfield and Birx ended up getting into some trouble with the Army. He made a decision. You know, it's very much in the military and in the medical field the way it is in many places. You just get moved to another position. So Redfield said he wanted to go back to practicing medicine, and he ended up going to Walter Reed. And but he and Birx got in trouble for having a cozy relationship with an outside organization they were passing classified information to, and all that sort of thing. So Birx she gets appointed to some federal commission by Obama, and Redfield practiced at Walter Reed. Then he got hired by the University of Maryland, and she started funneling government money, tens of millions of dollars of government money to him. And so that's their background. All right. So why did I tell you that? So that you know that these people were all misbehaving and doing unethical things. I mean, possibly criminal things, but definitely unethical things for decades. And nobody's ever made them pay for it. So why would anybody expect them to act any differently now? So the CDC basically is putting out false numbers. They instructed people, health professionals, to falsify death certificates. And Birx actually, you can watch this in one of the 6 o'clock conferences, and they were having those every day, instructed doctors to put cause of death as COVID, even if the person got hit by a bus and died of trauma. So they falsified death certificates, or I should say they instructed doctors to do it. They have these numbers like probable cases and confirmed cases, and they lump it all together because it gins up the numbers, and everybody's reporting the data differently. The CDC actually says on their website that their tests are faulty. I mean, it's actually on their website that the tests are incredibly faulty, and the false positives and false negatives at least 50% of the time. And then their definition of a case, this is on the CDC website, is that if I have dinner with you tonight and you're positive, without ever talking to me, I'm a case. And the people who I've had contact with are cases. So this one dinner with you could turn into a whole lot of cases just by contact. It's ridiculous.
It's insane.
Absolutely ridiculous. It's all done to gin up the cases, because the cases are what lock everybody down and cancel the seasons. And I mean, everything is getting canceled, as you know.
Yeah, and I just found out yesterday that the Kansas, where I live, Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Secretary Lee Norman doctored the data that was supposed to prove the efficacy of the masks in order to justify, our governor's mandate.
Yep, they do that. They do that all the time, and then they'll hurry up and change things around when they get caught. But sooner or later, that's going to come back to haunt them. I mean, my experience with criminals and despots, and I've dealt with a lot of them in government actually over the years, is that they get a little bit too full of themselves and overconfident, and they're overplaying their hand right now. And I'll tell you how they're doing it, in my opinion. The first thing is, the end game is supposed to be mandatory vaccines, right? And so, so that's what, and also I think to mess up this election pretty cute too. So they're going to test and test and test and test. Well, they've overplayed their hand on testing, because every day people are reporting. Now the firsthand reports are coming out. People are actually contacting us and saying, I made an appointment to go get the test. I didn't go, or I had to leave, and I can prove I was someplace else entirely, and I get a positive back on the test. One day in Florida, there were like 18 labs that reported 90-some thousand positives. 100% of the tests were positive. It's statistically impossible, okay? So if testing is the key to keeping the panic going, the testing thing is starting to fall apart. And even some of the sheeples out there are starting to respond to that. It just doesn't smell right. These are pretty pro-vaccine people behind this, and the vaccine uptake for kids was 88% before this started, and they were apoplectic about that. It's down to 74%, and with almost half of parents saying they're not sending their kids to school, even where they've gotten a mandate passed, it doesn't matter, because the mandate has to do with vaccinations for schools. So they screwed that up royally by shutting everything down and getting people out of the habit of taking kids to doctors. And every week or so, there's an article in our local newspaper with some pediatrician who's about apoplectic, about the need to get your kids to a pediatrician right away to get caught up on vaccines. Well, it must not be working, because a week later you got the same thing again. So anyway, I don't think they're uncorking champagne right now. As aggravated as we are, I look at things like that, because when I'm dealing with an enemy like this, I like to see where their vulnerabilities are, and they're showing a lot of them right now.
Absolutely. And the thing about this too is that with this lockdown and this isolation and everything, people, well, I'm not one of those, but many people just glue themselves to the TV and just take in all of this fear-based bullshit. And they have nothing else unless they go out of their way to do more research and dig a little deeper. They just take it for face value, and it has everybody absolutely freaked out, as you well know, because you were talking about all the calls that you get.
Well, there's going to be a change in that, though, too. And I'll tell you where it's coming. And I predicted, if you go back and you watch my videos from March, the first week of March, every single thing I've said was going to happen happened. So this is, again, they overplayed their hand. So right now it seems like a really good idea. You lock everybody down and you close certain businesses, and restaurants are at 25% capacity and all this kind of stuff. And for a while, what's been going on is everybody's been, the unemployed people are getting $600 a week from the feds, and all the $1,200 checks went out and all that kind of stuff. Well, what's going to happen now is more businesses are closing every week. More are closing, and then the money's run out. The feds are not sending any more money, and if we get something out of this next thing that Trump signed, his executive order, it's going to be like $1,200. Well, you're going to see when these people walking around with their masks and their virtuous nature and all that kind of stuff, when they can't pay their rent and they're getting evicted, and when their utilities are being shut off, let's see how on board they are with all of this then. So the compliant class right now has generally been people who have been unaffected. And I just spoke with a friend of mine today who owns some retail stores in another state, and she was telling me that her people all wanted to stay home. They were all scared. They wanted to stay home, and she said, "No, there's plenty of stuff we can do. We'll social distance, but we'll clean and we'll do inventory. We'll do all kinds of stuff we do." Nope, didn't want to do it. Well, the $600 a week for not working sounded really good. Well, that's gone. So now, and her stores are open again, with some restrictions, but they are open. And all of them want to come back now. And she goes, no, I hired other people. I don't want any people like you working for me anymore.
Wow.
And so anyway, where are these people going to go now? Because there are fewer places to get a job. So I think the cooperation and the fan club that some of these people have had is going to start to erode as the devastation starts to hit those people.
And there's a lot of scary stuff happening in some places too, like you mentioned in a couple of your videos. Tell us some examples of things that are happening in Kentucky and Arkansas.
Well, it's martial law, essentially. In Kentucky, law enforcement, what happened is this woman had a test. I mean, the first thing is don't go get tested. All right, just don't do it. And then you stay out of this mess. But she went to get tested because she was going to Michigan and wanted to be careful about her grandmother and all this. Well, she tested positive, and they gave her an unreasonable agreement to sign. She refused to sign it. And then 8 people, including people in hazmat suits, showed up at her house with law enforcement, put an ankle bracelet on her and her husband, and wouldn't let them leave the house. If they moved 200 feet beyond the front door, then they get arrested. In Arkansas, they hurriedly, did a public relations save on it. But in Arkansas and Wisconsin, they actually have isolation camps, and the National Guard is on duty 12-hour shifts, 24 hours a day, to take people to the isolation camps. I got the handbook for the Wisconsin isolation camp for people who can't stay away from people at home. They live with others, and it looks like what happens when you report to prison. It's what you're allowed to take, and if somebody brings something to you, it has to be inspected to make sure there's no contraband, and they leave the food outside the door, and it's like being in prison. And so people should get scared. In Ventura County, they locked down an entire apartment building and disabled their keys so that they couldn't leave and come back because somebody tested positive. So it's martial law. We're actually living in a scenario that's very much the way things were careening toward disaster when Hitler was starting his march to hell. We're in that same trajectory right now.
And you get a lot of flack for making comparisons to Nazi Germany and
I do.
calling, yeah, yeah. Why do you think that that is? Because the people want to trust their appointed officials?
Well, I think it's a couple things. I think the first thing is people don't read about history. And if you take the time to read about World War II, and even Stalin's Russia, there's all this contact tracing and all this kind of stuff that they're doing right now, and everybody's taking your temperature and accumulating data on you. There are only two times in history where that kind of data collection on the general population has been done, and it was when Stalin took over Russia. We all know what a great picnic that was, and Hitler in Germany, which in combination, I don't know if people know, your audience knows, but IBM was the Gestapo's partner. IBM set up a German subsidiary, and they used punch cards. What the Germans told everybody is they were taking a census. They were collecting data on people's religion and all this sort of thing. But IBM helped them compile and spit out all the data, and that's how they knew when they went in an apartment building to get the people in apartment 4F because they were Jewish, and to leave the 4G people alone because they were Presbyterian. And so this kind of data collection has been done only two times, and it was used for very nefarious purposes. So we have incredibly uneducated people who don't read history. They know nothing. They are the know-nothings. And the other thing is that they've never been affected by it in any meaningful way, whereas a lot of people in my age group had family members who died in the camps, and family members who fought in World War II and were there. One of my former colleagues, her husband was actually involved in freeing the camps. Well, when you've seen this firsthand, you know what this was really all about. So I think that's part of it, and I think the other thing is just disbelief that the United States could degenerate into something like this. But believe me, the Germans didn't think that it was possible at all.
Exactly. And it moves in increments.
Exactly. So and look at what's happened. It started with we're going to stay home for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and here we are months later, and the restrictions are more. Now we're wearing masks and we're social distancing, and we're but they've canceled the Big Ten football. Well, they said they were going to cancel it. The players are screaming again, to my point, that they're reaching the point where they're just not going to be able to continue the edicts ad infinitum unless they just go to martial law, bring in the National Guard, and you'll start to see people disappearing. And I'm not ruling that out at all.
And the numbers keep going down and down and down, right?
Right.
Why are people not paying attention to that? Like,
they're not thinking. They're not thinking. And it's the same kind of not thinking that has caused other things to happen in this country. I hate to bring politics into this, but I'm going to, all right? We almost saw a major political party nominate a person who expressed admiration for Fidel Castro and Chairman Mao. I want you to think about that for a minute. Now, fortunately, somebody with some kind of intellect in that party did a last minute save and said, we can't let that happen. But the fact that we have enough people in the United States that somebody like that could actually get elected. And I have some personal knowledge of the Chairman Mao thing. I own a business in China, and my business partner, her parents were imprisoned under Chairman Mao. She and her sister were in a labor camp. Both had extreme health issues as a result. I mean, so again, firsthand experience with that. And you've got this guy running for president who said, well, Mao really did help to educate the people. Well, tell that to my business partner. She'd love to hear about the education program that Chairman Mao had, because her parents died in prison.
Wow. Yeah, it's hard to scoff in the face of that, for sure.
Well, it is, and so why aren't they looking at the numbers? Why weren't they listening to that? I mean, was everybody so enthralled with all the free stuff that you couldn't hear that coming, or you didn't hear it when it came out of his mouth? Because he said it pretty directly. I mean, there wasn't any nuance to it. Where I mean, you could just watch the quote. You can still watch it on television. It's chilling to people who actually understand what those despotic regimes are all about.
And I think that people have, because there's so much different data coming from all different directions, and much of it is contradictory. So people just cherry pick what they want to believe in and what they don't want to believe in. And I think some of it is that they've been telling themselves this story for so long that they don't want it to be challenged.
Well, they don't want to be wrong. Nobody wants to be wrong. And I'll tell you, I'm just the opposite. I've said from the beginning, please prove me wrong, because what I'm seeing scares me. And I would love for somebody to reassure me that this isn't going this direction. And nobody has actually said anything. I mean, people will say, well, I looked at the CDC data and it says this. Well, look in 15 minutes and it's going to say that. I'm talking about actually meaningfully showing me that, yeah, there really is a horrifically contagious virus and everybody's in danger. And nobody has been able to show that. And I've invited it. I've said, I would like to be wrong because what I'm reporting is so horrifying that I would love to be proven wrong. Then I could sleep at night. Right now, I do not sleep well at night because I'm terrified. And you would not believe the number of people. I just had an exchange with somebody the other day who called and it was a very aggressive, nasty email. And so I said, I'm gonna send you just a sampling of articles. I think I sent her maybe 5, and they've collectively had maybe a couple hundred references. I said, check this out and tell me where I'm wrong. She writes back and says, oh, I don't have time to do that. Okay, so you don't have time to check anything out. So without checking anything out, you're just going to tell me I'm wrong.
Exactly.
I mean, what kind of dialogue is that, and how ignorant do you have to be to? It is a form of ignorance that's just almost hard to fathom.
Absolutely, it's a lack of critical thinking, and I think it's become a partisan issue too, unfortunately, which everything in America seems to become inevitably. So now everybody who opposes Fauci is automatically a Trump supporter and a redneck, and then by association a racist. So if you question the narrative, like I said earlier, you get lumped into being a right-wing conspiracy theorist. And that's the end of the debate right there. There's no conversation that happens.
Exactly. And it's a shame, but that's again a form of ignorance. In other words, when the conversation is about Fauci, please counter the claim about Fauci with accurate information that is different.
Yeah.
I mean, I have links to in the articles I write. You can watch. It comes out of the guy's mouth. We're going to have immunity passports that allow you to move around. I didn't say it. He said it. Here's the link. You can watch it online. So this has nothing to do with party. It has to do with what the people are saying. These people are actually saying these things, and they're becoming bolder and bolder, which I think works in our favor, because one thing I've noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed this, is that I think we started this whole debacle with 3 types of people, basically. I think we had the sheeples on the one side who just bought the whole thing hook, line, and sinker. And many of them, truthfully, like my friend who owns those stores, they were kind of excited about sheltering at home for $600 a week. It was more than what they were making at their restaurant job or whatever. Then you had the people like me and you who were questioning it from the get-go and saying something isn't right. Then you had this middle group that probably, I think, didn't know what to think of it, might as well err on the side of caution. But the longer this has gone on and the crazier it gets, the more of those people I think we pick up. And I've noticed that there are more and more people who are saying, I kind of watched this for a while, and I understand what you're talking about. So again, I think they've overplayed their hand. They're letting the middle group come to our side due to their incompetence. And it's not the first time that despots have become full of themselves. But it does not have to do with party. It has to do with freedoms. And I want to know from the people who think that this is about Trump or Biden, what part of you don't live in a free country anymore don't you understand? I mean, if your apartment building can be locked down so that you can't come and go because one person tested positive for the flu, what kind of place, where are we living now?
Exactly. Well, and there's, excuse me, all this talk of a mandatory vaccine. Do you think that it's necessarily something that they're going to come door to door to and sit you down and plunge it into your arm? Or is it going to be more, okay, you don't have to get it, but then you don't get these privileges.
I don't think they're going to come door to door. I think it depends. I do think it depends on who's president. I think Biden would for sure go door to door, and you get your immunity passport and that kind of thing. He said, actually, he said you can watch it online that if he were elected president, he would have Fauci in the White House every day, and he'd have Fauci talking to the public every day too. And that's a very scary thing for people who know a little bit about his background. But I don't see Trump doing that. And our goal is to amass a voter base that's so huge that they wouldn't be able to get away with it anyway. This is to a certain extent only going on the way that it is because of cooperation of people. And if a significant percentage of people just stopped cooperating, it would be over fast because they really don't have any capacity, at least at this minute, to lock up, say, 3 million people in Ohio and 2.5 million in Indiana and 5 million in Michigan. They just don't have any resources to do that.
So when you were discussing the virus earlier that happened in 2009 or 10, and I asked you what you thought the agenda was, and you said to get everybody vaccinated. That's obviously the case here too, and there's also lots of talk
There's more
about.
to it.
Yeah. What is your take on that? What is the more to it?
I think that you have a group of fairly elite people in the world who Bill Gates is one of them. He thinks he's smarter than all of us. He's richer than all of us, and he should make decisions for all of us. He's always thought he knew better than everybody else. And by the way, an interesting perspective on Bill Gates that I had never thought about in terms of the way he goes about doing things was my co-author in the book wrote this. I thought it was really great. He said, Bill is not a self-made man. His mother made his first deal for him with IBM, the people who were helping with the Holocaust, great company. But anyway, she made the deal for him, and the family had long connections to people who were into eugenics. I mean, Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, spoke at KKK rallies. These were friends of the Gates family. So Bill comes from a long background of people with questionable ethics, I think we might say. If you'd want to talk about racists, I think rallies for the KKK would be about as racist as you get. And so if you remember back, Microsoft's history was making shoddy products. I remember whenever the joke was never get an update from them, wait till the thing's on the market for 2 years, because it was crappy products. And he stole intellectual property from other people, and then he got sued by the government won. And then he took his shoddy practices and started working on healthcare for the world through his foundation and did exactly the same thing. He's bought up every organization. He's the biggest funder of the NIH and the World Health Organization, and he privatized the National Academy of Sciences. And so he basically has taken over healthcare to the place that a newspaper or magazine article last year the title was "Meet the World's Most Powerful Doctor." So how do you like having somebody like that in charge, right? So these are people who think they know better for what everybody should do. And the World Health or the World Economic Forum, the guy who founded that, I can't remember his name right offhand, Klaus, I think is his name. Anyway, Klaus actually says this is a great opportunity to remake the world. And he thanked Greta Thunberg for showing everybody the light. And I've always thought that one of the ways to build your reputation worldwide is to have a depressed high school dropout calling the shots. I've always thought that if we had more depressed high school dropouts at Wellness Forum Health, we would really rule healthcare. I mean, just on it's absurd. It's absurd. And so this is all about getting control of people. And what they want to do is you have to do what they say, or you can't leave your house, and you can't travel from country to country, and you can't use money, and you have to use cards, and everything's digital so that the government can control and know everywhere you go. And by the way, if the government can do that, they can actually freeze your money if you do something they don't like. Again, it's just like the Nazis. You have no rights under the way that these people want to rule our lives, and we just can't let it happen.
And what is trust stamp?
That's, I think that, well, there are a whole bunch of versions. There's COVID Pass and there's trust stamp, but the whole idea is that everything is stored digitally on your body, believe it or not. And cops walking around with smartphones can tell if you've got your immunity passport, and you can. It's used for your identity, so that we know that you are who you are when you go to vote or write a check or anything, transact anything financially. And it's like a dystopian nightmare, really.
Yeah, absolutely. All of this is, which makes it that much more unbelievable to people who, only catch the news in between watching sports games or something and just kind of peek in and go, oh my God, oh, I'm sure they've got our best interests in mind. I trust the experts.
Yeah, right. Good luck with that.
So, what does trust stamp have to do with vaccinations then?
Well, it's all tied together. The state tells you what you have to do, and then the tattoos and the little things implanted in your body allow the state to control what you are allowed to do based on your compliance with certain things. So if you have a lot of cash, you're not going to be able to spend it. And if you do something like, if you just think about how scary it's been, I'll back up here. One of the things that is being sorted out in the courts right now, and through changes in laws and that sort of thing, is the idea that the federal government can take away assets of yours when it's investigating you for something, even if you didn't do it. So in our country, you're innocent until proven guilty. Well, for certain types of federal crimes, you're guilty unless you prove yourself innocent. So your assets are seized and that sort of thing. And this goes on with a great deal of regularity. It's happened. People have lost their businesses over this kind of thing. And so we know that the government's kind of heavy-handed in this kind of area. So the idea that the government could regulate your financials by basically just making your tattoo not work anymore. Like you don't have access to your money because somebody thinks you did something, or a snitch told on you, or you didn't do something that you were supposed to do as a condition of employment. I mean, it's just terrifying to think about the world turning into that.
Exactly. We've been watching this in science fiction movies for decades. Like, come on, guys.
Well, you know what though? That's part of the problem too, because this is not because conspiracy theory, and there have been a number of mainstream documentaries that have looked at this, that Hollywood has collaborated with government agencies to create movies and programming that prime the population
Yep.
to think that these kinds of things are normal. And so if you watch enough science fiction movies where robots are telling you what to do, for people who are pretty susceptible, it can make people think that that's not abnormal, or that facial recognition is what allows you to walk into a store. Now, if you watch that enough, it starts to seem kind of normal. And right now, something I saw that was horrifying. The other day, they took down the video it was posted on YouTube, but some parents in California found out that the curriculum in California was teaching pedophilia as a sexual orientation that is acceptable because people can't help it.
Jesus.
Okay. I mean, a news story covered it. This was actually like a little, because parents were apoplectic, as you might imagine. They were out protesting and all this sort of thing. And so they took it down because it was viewed like a lot of times. But think about that. What that's doing is it's priming children to think that when, your uncle who's a little gropey starts playing around with you when your parents aren't looking, that's actually okay.
He can't help it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's frightening.
It is. It is. And what's really frightening is that everybody isn't screaming at the top of their lungs. I think that's probably another thing driving kids coming out of school right now, the dystopian nightmare that they've created in terms of the environment. But also, a lot of parents saw what was going on with school when they got their kids home for a couple, 3 months, and said, academically, I'm not sending them back.
Yeah, that's insane. Well, I have a lot of questions, but there's a couple I just want to make sure to get in because we're kind of rounding towards the end here. How is our right to not wear a mask protected by the Constitution?
Well, we are a country of laws, and so here's the problem, right? So in the case of an emergency, I think that we all want somebody to make a decision and tell us what to do. Like I think that, for example, God forbid, if there was a credible threat that somebody was going to drop a bomb on Worthington, which is the suburb I live in, I think it'd be good for me to take the cat and go to the basement until the threat was gone. I do. All right. And I would like for somebody to tell me that. Now, there's a difference between that credible threat and me being in the basement tonight and maybe part of tomorrow and me being in the basement at Thanksgiving. Okay. So I think that, emergencies, we do need to have somebody in charge, but the question is, what's the definition of an emergency? We need to work that out. Who we need checks and balances, and there are checks and balances. All of these governors, in many cases, the legislatures have tried. They tried in Pennsylvania. They've tried here. Our emperor basically said if the legislature passed any laws that reigned in his power, he would just veto them, and he does that. When people ask him for justification, where's his data? He says, I don't have to provide it. Well, there must be some way to get these people out of office, and or to just make it a criminal act to declare yourself exempt from any type of oversight. So anyway, a lot of things we have to work out, but what's being done is completely unlawful. And I'm hoping at some point in time that there will be criminal penalties. I think that people who lost family members in the nursing homes, I think that people who didn't get access to health care and died, I think that as pain and suffering for people whose family members died without anybody around, babies who were taken away from their mothers because their mothers came in contact with somebody 2 weeks before delivery. I mean, there's so much liability here for these people, and some of it should have criminal penalties. So I'm hoping before I die, we see some Nuremberg trials about something like, along that line for some of these people.
Absolutely. Well, tell us about your organization, Make Americans Free Again.
Yeah, so I've been working on legislative issues in the healthcare field for my whole 25 years in business for a variety of reasons. And I think one of the things that we've reached, everybody agrees on right now, is that these people, we see it right now, they're not interested in any kind of evidence or science or reasonable discussion or anything else. So what they are interested in is being in office, and we have to have the horsepower to get them out. And it starts with the legislatures. By the way, the vaccine mandates are all state right now. We've looked into this, and I don't think the feds really are going to be able to, without some kind of passing of laws, meet us at the front door right now. So we better be very careful about this fall election, because we have some people in favor of that running for office. But anyway, we've got to have the votes to start taking out these pro-vaccine people. And so what we're doing, makeamericans.freeagain.com is the website, and you go there and you get all your information in there. We don't want your money. We just want your name and your information and your state representative and state senator. And our goal is to get tens of millions of people into that database, and then be able to sit down with a state representative, for example, and say, here, let me explain our new system here, okay? You may not be aware of our organization, but we have a new program for you. It's called Citizens in Charge. And I've been doing a lot of studying of state races, and a lot of these people, they win their election by like 2,000, 2,300 votes. And so you say there, this is what I want. I want the ability to choose for myself whether or not to get a vaccine. I want that authority over my children. And are you a yes or no on that? And just before you answer the question, I'm going to tape your answer. I want to remind you, you won your election by 2,300 votes, and we have 7,000 members in your district. So if it's the wrong answer, we're taking you out. And all you have to do is do that like a few times, and then the other ones get the word, and they'll do anything to hang on to their seats. They will even do what their constituents want. That's how low they'll go just to stay elected, right? And that's what we have to do. So that's what we're doing, and we think that voter base could have the power to actually, it as a single unit, if 70 million people walk into the middle of the street and say, we're not going home until you tell us that there isn't any mandatory vaccine. I mean, with that number of people, you can make a lot of things happen. And then while we're doing that, we're providing services that are much needed, like the Homeschool Resource Center and the Legal Resource Center, and services for people who are suffering because of all this going on. We're trying to help with all that kind of stuff. We're planning on filing some lawsuits ourselves very soon. So that's what we are doing, makeamericansfreeagain.com. So if you're belonging to local organizations, don't stop that. But what we're doing is a little bit different. We're amassing a voter base that is sortable by district. And so you can support your local group and participate in their activities and give them money. We just need your name and your contact information.
That's fantastic. More power to you. I will definitely put the link on the episode notes. What kind of turnout have you gotten?
It's been shockingly fabulous. I mean, kind of
Cool.
beyond my wildest expectations in the first 3 weeks. And that's before we really got our feet wet. And we're going to be launching this week some recruiting information and materials and that sort of thing, which we didn't want to do till we learned a little bit more about how it was working. But I'm really excited. I think people understand the need for it. And I also think that because we're not competing with other organizations, it makes people relax. So I don't want anybody who belongs to another organization to leave that organization or withdraw your funding from it. I don't want you, I tell people, if you like what we do, buy something from my company. We make food, we own a school, we have excellent educational programs. So that's a way that you can contribute if you want to. But in terms of donation money, you give that to your local folks, and we'll handle the rest of this because we're pretty dedicated to working this out. I have a real big personal interest in it myself, and that's why I'm willing to do it.
Fantastic. So thankful that you are doing that. What can you tell? And you said that you're also working on a book, right?
I am. It's called COVID Operation: What Happened, Why It Happened, and What's Next. And it digs into the background on this whole thing, and the people and the planning, and looks at the scientific evidence to support all these actions, which there really isn't any. So it's a pretty interesting book, and I think it's the most comprehensive piece I've seen, and I have a style of putting material together, which is one of the things that's made our company the size that it is, which is that I cover enough material that if you were taking one of our courses or you're reading one of my books, I wouldn't want you to not read other books, but if you just read mine or you just took our course on a topic, you would know a lot about it, a lot, probably more than any other single source that you would consult. So it's pretty thorough.
Fantastic. And when is it going to be released?
September.
Cool.
I'm going to have my part of the manuscript for the proofreaders and everybody to work on finished by Sunday, and I've scheduled sleeping for Sunday.
Just one day of rest.
Oh, just what I want to do is just lay on the couch and read a book or something. I haven't done that for a long time, but yeah, I'm working like crazy woman this week to get it done, and then everybody else gets to have their say about how it flows. And I'm not very good at finding my own typos and things like that, so other people will take care of that. But yeah, it'll be finished on Sunday. We've got the cover design done, and they've done the publisher's done the inside layout and look and all that. So a lot of stuff we've got done, and just we're in the home stretch now.
Fantastic. Well, perhaps I can have you on after it's been out a little bit, and then we can kind of check up on how things are in a month or two. And
that'd be great.
Yeah, yeah. You said, and also to maybe the thing that you couldn't reveal earlier, you will be able to reveal at that time. So
I will.
Fantastic. What do you think about the protests that have been happening in Berlin and London and Montreal?
I think the bigger they are, the better they are, the more of a message they send. And we need to have some here of that size. And that's another reason for amassing our voter base. Can you imagine if we could say there are 2 million people in Ohio and we are all going out on Saturday, all 2 million of us? Okay.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
That'd be fantastic.
So I think that, I mean, they postponed the mainland China, kind of taking over of Hong Kong. They postponed it for a year just because they had hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. They just shut everything down by the sheer numbers, and we can do that here for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It just takes not waiting for somebody else to do it and stepping up. And I love that the Make Americans Free Again is nonpartisan. It has nothing to do with this side or that side. It has to do, that's it.
And I think that's the key is let's not really worry. All that we're vetting candidates for. I don't care what party they belong to. I don't care what race or ethnicity they are. We're interested in two things. Where do you stand on this freedom issue right now? All these edicts that are coming from our emperors, and where do you stand on this forced vaccine issue? And that's basically how we're vetting people. And by the way, there are reasonable Democrats and reasonable Republicans. It's the extremes of parties that cause problems for everybody. And I think we've got to get back to a place where America's kind of in the middle. It always has been. And what's causing all this friction is crazy people who go too far in a particular direction. And they're fortunately not the majority, but they sure are noisy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the farther out you are, the less apt you are to actually have a conversation with the other side.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is what we need to do. We need to unite. We don't need to be fragmented any more than we already are. And now we're fragmented by masks too.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, we're gonna do something about that. Stay tuned.
Yeah. I can't wait, and I'm going to do my part for sure. Where can people find you online?
Our company's website is wellnessforumhealth.com. My email address is pampopper@msn.com. And I put out a newsletter on Monday and video clips Tuesday through Friday. It's all free. And you can subscribe by just sending me an email. And then you can go to makeamericans.freeagain.com and sign up there too.
Fantastic. Well, Pam, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and have a conversation. What you do is incredible and inspiring, and I wish you all the luck. And hopefully I can have something to do with getting some of this info out and maybe amassing a few numbers myself. So
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. My honor. And as I said, we'll have you on again in a month or two, and we'll see where all this is at. Hopefully in a much better place.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much, Pam.
All righty. Bye.
Well, that was a very inspiring conversation for me. Pam has a great way of just getting down to the nitty-gritty and giving you the information that counts and gives you a way to do something about it, and in such a way where it is uplifting and it's not depressing. And it doesn't mean that these subjects or the way that they're being handled by our government and governments isn't depressing or sad or, enraging sometimes. But I was left with the feeling that there is something that we can do about this. Our hands aren't tied. It really is a change of mind. It's a shift of perspective. And hers seems very no-nonsense. It's not based in any wild theories. Everything that she said can be looked up and researched on your own. You could find out all the things that she found out. She didn't have any top-secret information. All of that stuff is out there in the open. She has just done the research and connected the dots and put it together in such a way, to my mind, that really had a lot of impact. And hopefully it has an impact on you too, and at least getting you thinking, if you don't already think, or if you don't lean towards Pam's way of viewing things, at least it will get your mind, your gears grinding, and possibly considering some things that you didn't think to consider before, or you never heard it put in such a way. So yeah, I hope that you were able to glean something positive from that, regardless of what that is. I want to thank you guys very, very much for listening. It's very appreciated. If you've made it this far to me babbling at the end of the podcast, then you're a hero or heroine. Absolutely. So kudos to you. If you would like to support this podcast, if you like what you've heard, and maybe you've heard other episodes and you like the content and the way that it's handled, there's a lot of ways that you can show support. And one of the most tangible ways is going to my Patreon page, www.patreon.com/themeltpodcast. And you will find ways to contribute. Anything from $1 up per month will really help this podcast out. I've got bills, just basic podcast bills at this point, but there are other things that I would like to do. I would like to travel and do interviews. I would like to upgrade equipment. I would like to get a bigger or better space to do a podcast in. Right now I'm in my bedroom. So yes, I want to make this a better podcast, and if I can get some financial support for it, hopefully that will free up more time for me to be able to devote to this podcast. I would like to put out more than 2 episodes per month, or an episode every 2 weeks, whatever that adds up to. So that all of that will go towards that and will be greatly appreciated. Other ways that you can do it are posting and sharing things on your social media data harvesting platform of choice. We are no longer on Facebook, and I'm not sure how long we'll stay on Instagram or Twitter. I'm still weighing that out. Yeah. Anyway, so you can share and spread the word that way, or to your friends and family. And you can go to wherever it is that you get this podcast, whether that be Apple Podcasts or Google Play or Spotify, so on and so forth. You can leave a good review or leave lots of stars as a rating. And that helps to spread the word also. All right. The end of another episode draws to a close. Thank you again. I hope this episode got your heart pumping. It certainly did mine. And this is an impromptu episode. So actually, it will be next Friday when the next episode comes out. And I know that everybody will really love it. It's a very long one, and it's on a very compelling set of subjects. I'm not going to give it away, though. All right. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you all so much. And until next time, take care.